Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years. Well, happy Friday to you, JJ.
Thank you.
How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. You know, the stay-at-home stuff has been continuing.
Indeed.
Everyone's maybe feeling a little bit cooped up lately. Which is okay. I mean, this is just kind of part of it, right?
Yeah, it is. We're spending a lot of time with our families.
Spending a lot of time with our families, which gives us a lot of time to interact with and think about.
It gives us a lot of material.
Right? Yeah. I've got pages of notes. But as you know, I've got two teenage boys and a little girl. And the one thing that is somewhat, sometimes amusing to me and more often kind of frustrating to me is sometimes the boys say like the dumbest things. Right? And this is just part of being a teenage boy. Well,
I've got a 21-year-old, and I can tell you it does seem to continue even into the early 20s sometimes.
I feel like I'm still somewhere on that spectrum.
We'll tread lightly
towards the bottom still. But what I thought was like really interesting is like sometimes, they're generally well-intentioned, but sometimes they say things that you just think like, what? Like it's so like they just have such little concept of what's happening,
cause and effect.
How their feelings are, you can totally tell like their feelings inside and what they do externally are completely like not in sync in any way. And I thought like, wow, okay, like here's a very easy example of like some humans that are not particularly self-aware, right?
Right. Yeah. But at least
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I know. I was going to say, at least you probably give them a little grace because they're your kids, or they are kids.
Because they are kids, right?
Yeah, because they are kids.
But then I think like, okay, so we're kind of like in this self-awareness biz a little bit, right? We want to help people with this. Like, how would I help, these young men be a little bit more self-aware, right? As a parent, like, how could I coach that? But then I got thinking more broadly, like I know plenty of adults who need a little bit of self-awareness help. And, we have this podcast, we kind of share these stories, but, just the idea, like, how do you help people become more self-aware? How do you teach people to be more self-aware?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I actually, as soon as you started to talk about it and you said more broadly, I was like right there with you. And I started in my mind, I had like a Rolodex, and I was kind of going through people that we both know and comparing like their level of. I know, I won't name any names. But there's a couple of people that you and I have talked about for a long time in which their awareness is absolutely not present.
Yeah, like you can beat them with a stick, right?
Yes. And then there's others where they're very self-aware, but they don't know what to do with it, right? It's like, oh, I feel this way, but I don't want to infringe myself. I don't want to push myself on anybody or anything. But it does bring up an interesting question of how can you help people be more self-aware? And do we have the ability, the scope, the scale, or even is it okay for us to even think that we can teach people self-awareness?
Because, you and I have talked about how we're both self-help junkies a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Like we read all the books, like
Yeah.
and I was reflecting like, but did I actually learn any self-awareness by this like academic approach to
Yeah.
like
Right. Right.
that discovery, right? And I don't know that I did. I probably learned a lot of uh, psychology words, but I don't
Yeah.
how it affected me and my own personal journey. I'm not really sure.
Well, and I always think like for me, when I was younger, sometimes I had a hard time learning stuff. And, now they talk about what's your learning style, are
Mm,
you auditory? Are you whatever? Do you like to see it, read it, hear it? What is it? Um, and I think too that a lot of times when we read books or we hear lectures, it's a theoretical approach to a very emotional and very sensitive thing.
mhm.
And um, and so I think even in the conversation of how do we teach people better self-awareness, I think it's a very slippery slope because for one thing, if people tell me like how to be, my personality, and it's been like this since I was very little, I'm like, oh, really? You're going to tell me what to do? Oh, you are, huh? You're going to tell me what to do. Well, watch me do the opposite.
Yeah.
Like my dad was a vice president of a college and I gave him he was like, you're going to go to college, you're going to do this. And I was like, nope, I'm going to prove I don't have to. Like, that was not me. That was not me on my best
For
self-aware day.
for no other reason other than to just be combative or something.
Yeah, I think snot is the word that I've used, just to be a snot. But that's interesting was when you think about self-awareness, it's like, um, first of all, when we're talking about kids not being self-aware, we always seem to naturally want to give them a lot more grace about it. It's like, oh, that's okay. They're just they have this desire, or they're very immediate, or they're just young, or
Mm,
we have all these natural ways of giving them it's okay, right? It's okay that they don't have that because we are optimistic that as they gain maturity and experience that they'll become more self-aware as time goes on. At least we hope so. But with adults, I think it's even harder because I don't think we give grace to adults like we give to our children. You
no, right?
know,
Us adults were supposed to know everything already
yeah.
and have
So
matured and gone through, all this and
yeah,
I feel like adults judge adults a lot quicker
harsh.
and harsher.
Yeah, in a really, really harsh way. And I so I think like when we're talking about self-awareness, if we notice somebody that isn't self-aware, I would like to say that that's what we're doing is we're just noticing it, but I actually think we're judging it.
Mm,
I don't think we're just noticing it. I don't think we're being objective. I think we're being kind of judgy.
mhm.
And I think that lens comes from ourselves. Like for me, I really am at least honest enough with myself and you in this podcast. No one else is listening. Everyone. I'm being honest in front of everyone. Um, I think that the hardest part for me is when I see somebody that's acting in a way that's what I deem as really unaware and dumb. Just being honest with how I would think about it inside. And if I'm really honest and I trace that feeling all the way back in, it's because I recognize that in myself too.
Mm.
Because you can't see something in someone else unless you too have it.
That's a really deep statement. That
Yeah.
that one like flips my thinking around. Like I have to turn my brain around because that's not like the normal way I
Yeah.
think about things. So you said you the when you recognize something in someone else, when you see someone else acting in a certain way, it's more like you recognize that in yourself. That's a behavior that you've done, you're currently doing, or you've done in your past. You have some experience with that
Right.
kind of behavior.
Right. So at least the awareness is big inside of you around it. So like if you see somebody being very abrasive or well, let's not even use a really over the top. Let's just say we see somebody like seeking attention in a crowd.
Mhm.
Okay. They're like showboating, and you can clearly see they're doing that. If you recognize it so much in them, it's because that particular thing, either the having of it or the absence of it, is very
Mm.
strong in you.
Mhm.
So if you see somebody being really over the top and you yourself have some of that sometimes, you'll and you don't feel good about yourself when you do it, you're going to see that person and go, I can't believe they're doing that.
Mm.
If you have the absence of it, if you're a more introverted person and you watch somebody showboating, you immediately think, ugh, I never want to do that.
Yeah.
Like that makes me so personally uncomfortable because there's some energy with that inside of you. So, sorry, I thought you were going to say something. I just think it's so like, as we talk about like, so how can you help people be more self-aware? Like to me, recognizing our own thinking patterns around our own self-awareness is really like, for me, that's the only thing that makes sense.
Mhm. Well, that's such a good example, like the the recognizing it in you and the recognizing the lack of it. I actually never thought about that. That showboating example is like really rings true to me because like that's not me, but I
Yeah.
recognize it right away, and I just kind of
Mhm.
think, oh, look at that person, that's ridiculous.
Exactly.
But like
Yeah.
part of me wishes I would go up there and do that stuff, right? Like,
And maybe, but I just think it's like, and we don't even have to like judge it. We don't have to. This is the thing, is we're so used to putting everything in a judgment. Like
mhm,
we're so used to doing that. And the more harshly we're judging other people, in my experience, I feel the more I am harshly judging other people, if I'm really honest with myself, it's the very topics that I'm judging myself on
mm,
really strongly. Like that showboating, like I was in sales my whole life. And in order to be good in sales, you have to be real comfortable showboating. When I was young, I was over the top. And I was very well paid because I could be over the top. But a lot of it didn't feel right for me. It wasn't like me and my authentic self. I felt like I was pushing myself out of it. So
mm,
now if I see other people and they may be younger or less experienced or have less exposure to certain things that I've seen or whatever, and I see that showboat, I think, oh, I recognize that.
mhm,
That does not look good.
mhm. So when you would come across someone who's acting like that, um, kind of in as a coach, right? How
Yeah.
would how would you go about trying to help them see that, right?
Yeah.
Or become aware that, you know, they are maybe acting a bit over the top or not really in alignment with themselves. Like how do you
Yeah.
approach that topic with somebody?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting, and, like, the first thing I would say, like, what comes up
Like,
for me when you ask that is, boy, oh boy, I would never ever wanna just tell somebody, like, "Oh, man, you are over the top," right? Like, I would not wanna and you just, like, think of it yourself too, like, how many people have, like, gotten up in your grill and they're gonna teach you something that they see in you? You're
right,
not up
like
for
you
that
said,
at
like, they're
all.
gonna right, yeah.
You know, it's like, don't, oh, ooh, no, I don't know. I don't care if you're an expert. Go away. Go away. I think that first of all,
I think we've all definitely sat around and daydreamed plenty about telling telling off that one person about how they're acting like a jerk at the office, right? Lots of brain cycles been spent on the fantasy of it,
and around the water cooler
right? Yeah,
conversations probably and stuff like that. But you know what? The very first thing is like the two things that I just immediately thought of when you asked the question. And the first thing is like ask them permission if you can give them some feedback. If
mhm,
you feel that it's appropriate and you feel like it's over the top, you feel like there's something that they would be able to benefit from, but you are generally interested in their development, not your being able to dump your feelings with them.
mhm,
It's not about that. It's about like boy, I just recognize this person gets themselves stuck in this corner over and over and over again. And there's actually a pretty easy way for them to not, if they just shifted 5% of something,
Mhm.
like, so the first thing is kind of asking it, would it be okay if I gave you some feedback? And if they begrudgingly agree, or if they say no problem and let
Yeah.
it go, and that's absolutely fine. Like, they don't want to hear that, and they're maybe not ready, or they already know it and they just don't want you to say something to them because it
Mhm.
makes them really deeply embarrassed. I mean,
Yeah, and bear like they might be aware of it, and it's just
yeah,
hard for them to control that action, right?
yeah,
Like I see that
exactly.
a lot.
Yeah. And if you feel like you're close enough to this, like if you feel like that you're close enough to the individual and that you're very objective about how you would frame any conversation with that person, and you're doing it for their best interest, not yours,
Hmm.
then I think that the next thing would be to explain it more like from your own perspective, if you have experience with that.
Mm.
Like, as we were talking about, like the younger salesperson. Actually, you know what? I actually did this. I got called last week. A telemarketer called me. My very first job was a telemarketer job. Oh my God. Don't even get me started on the stories. But there's a very scripted way in which you do it that is the correct way, right?
Hmm.
This person linked in with me on LinkedIn, looked at my profile, made a bunch of decisions about what my financial state was based on my profile.
Mm. Hmm.
I answered the call and they said, "Hello, Melissa. This is da 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 da. We just linked in together yesterday, and I sent you a message that said this." And he literally talked nonstop without me saying a single peep. And it must have gone on for almost a full minute. He read his entire script. And I just thought, this is not a good thing for this guy. And so
Yeah.
I said, "May I interrupt you, please?" And he was like, "Sure." And I said, "Are you open to some feedback?" And he said, "Okay." And he sounded like, yeah, I mean, he was so
Yeah.
excited that I didn't hang up on him.
Right.
But in that example, I just said, "I've done that job and it's a really hard job. And I really appreciate that you're cold calling today when everybody is having the anxiety they are about
Hmm.
finances and stuff like that. However, the way that you went about that, I couldn't even get a word in edgewise. You literally verified that it was my name. And then you just talked. And I had no opportunity to have any impact in the conversation at all.
Hmm.
And so I just validated the situation. First of all, I said, "I understand this is a really hard job and I really appreciate that you're trying to do it. I used to do this too and it was very hard, and here's what I learned by doing it that way. People don't want to be in partnership with you, they just want to hang
Hmm.
up." Right? So I to me, that's what it is. It's like asking permission, first of all, with the person's best interest in mind, and then offering guidance through your own lens, your own
Yeah.
experience.
Right. Share your story. My first question is, did you buy the deluxe set of Tupperware from him, or did
No,
you
but
pass on that exclusive opportunity?
I got a great set of knives coming. No, I did not. But I like to think that I gave him something much more valuable than an order.
A life lesson, maybe.
Right. Well, how about what is that?
Well,
How does that resonate for you? What do you do something different, or what do you think about that?
no, I mean, I agree that, you know, really like the best form of teaching this topic is by sharing stories. Like I was
Mhm.
saying earlier, like read a lot about it. Um,
Mm.
but it really, until you and I have started swapping stories about like, what do these
Yeah.
different parts of self-awareness mean, and what's my experience and what's your experience, it really doesn't start to shape
Mhm.
in your brain until those stories go. And like, I'm a big fan that, like, really stories are the way humans connect and share. And
I know,
there's
yeah.
this more intellectual thing that we really like to be proud of ourselves about, like, how intellectually and scientifically smart we can be about things. But really, when you get down to it, what turns like something into true like knowing in your heart? A lot
Yeah.
most of the time that is stories from other people.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And because stories and you've always been so good about stories. And I, for me, it's not only that connection piece, but when you tell stories, it allows people to go, like you're saying, is like that heart connection. It's allowing them to go deeper into not just themselves, but also a relationship with someone else in a level that is much more binding and much more authentic.
Hmm.
And when people can get to that level of authenticity, then their true feelings, thoughts, concerns, actions can come up where they're not feeling judged, where
Hmm.
they don't feel like, or where like if it's me, like if I feel like I'm connecting with someone more, I'm much more willing to talk about the things that I don't feel good about.
Hmm.
You know, I'm much more willing to be more authentic about, well, yeah, this is how I've covered it in the past. Like, I've been
Yeah.
really scared of not doing a good job here, but what I've shown instead is mad. Like, I've gotten real mad with people, but it just allows that real level of authenticity, I think.
I'd say vulnerability, right? Like
Yes. Yeah.
sharing story. You're able to share vulnerability, your own
Hmm.
vulnerability in a story a lot
Hmm.
easier than more like stating it in a fact kind of way. Right.
Right. Right. Brene Brown has done amazing work on vulnerability, and she did a TED talk that has just catapulted her career on vulnerability. And I still listen to it. I mean, it was several years ago, but it is so true, that vulnerability piece. The stronger the more vulnerable a person can be, is actually the stronger that the person is.
Hmm.
And we always kind of think about it in the other way around. But if our listeners are interested in learning more about vulnerability, she's a really, really good thought leader in that.
Super good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like um, I should share some of these, self-awareness stories with my 13-year-old and see how that goes over. I should probably expect great things, right?
I'll do that with my 21-year-old, and we'll circle back and see what happens.
Perfect. I look forward to it.
All right. Sounds great. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.